To the delight of society, 2020's time is almost up, and that means we gotta start talking Game of the Year. As is the case every year, this video is not only just my opinion, but it's entirely based around what I got the chance to play personally. The last 12 months have been pretty dope for video games, and I unfortunately didn't get the chance to try quite as much as I would have liked to. Final Fantasy VII Remake, Hades, and Ori and the Will of the Wisps are all titles I want to check out at some point. Then you've got other top contenders like Doom Eternal and Animal Crossing New Horizons, which just aren't my cup of tea. So I'm naturally not going to put down the cash for them. And of course, the newly released Cyberpunk 2077 will be calling to me over the next month, but I'm determined to finish Assassin's Creed Valhalla before I dive in. It would also be great if they fixed the game in that time as well. Just saying. So with that personal context explained, let's chat about my top 3 contenders for Game of the Year before we reach a final verdict. I liked Spider-Man Miles Morales a lot. Having completed 2 playthroughs and acquired that beautiful shiny platinum trophy, I know for a fact the game improves a lot of aspects from Spider-Man 2018. The pacing is superb. There is not a moment wasted in its story. It builds to a satisfying climax which does a great job at demonstrating Miles' character growth from beginning to end. Plus it can only really be considered short when compared to other bloated games in the open world genre. And that same praise towards pacing also applies to the gameplay. Many players will rejoice to hear the forced stealth sections and lab puzzles from the original have been replaced by nothing but you always swinging around New York fighting as Miles himself. I personally didn't mind those slower moments in 2018 that forced you to play as different characters as much as others seemed to, but I was by no means disappointed by their removal here. The core combat and gameplay loop remains largely the same with some underlying issues greatly improved. Mechanically, Venom powers and camouflage add a terrific new layer to combat, making it somehow even more fun and fluid. The number of available gadgets has been halved after there were previously way too many to use consistently, and I still didn't really use them all. And map clearing has become much more manageable. Crimes can now easily be tracked via an in-game app, and the amount of enemy bases has been reduced. Insomniac hit all of that stuff out of the park again. For me, it's the story where the game loses a bit of steam, especially compared to Spider-Man PS4. By design, it has a smaller scale, but the stakes themselves didn't quite resonate with me. There was something about going on Peter Parker's journey in 2018, being with him every step of the way as he is pushed to physical and emotional limits to save his city, that I remember incredibly fondly. Laurie Lowenthal's wonderful lead performance definitely contributed to that. But my preference for the first game's story is obviously entirely subjective. And of course, huge shout out to the original killer soundtrack, which is sublime once again. So, Spider-Man Miles Morales is a really solid experience, but it falls in the rankings a little bit for me, not only because of my story preference, but the fact that it is overall still a very similar experience to what I already had 2 years ago in Spider-Man PS4. Getting 100% completion especially gave me those feelings of deja vu. Regardless, I can't wait to see how Insomniac pushes the envelope with their full sequel on PS5, which would more than likely feature Miles as fully playable alongside Peter. Ghost of Tsushima is a game that's going to stand out as a clear Game of the Year for a lot of people this year, there's no doubt. And I totally understand why. The art direction is superb, the depiction of feudal Japan through its performances and cinematography is masterful, the core combat is fun and fresh, particularly I loved the stances system and how it forced the player to be constantly thinking of the game's internal rock paper scissors style rules in real-time gameplay. And, of course, the story has some real highlight moments. But as a package, it just didn't quite connect with me entirely in the ways I would have liked. Unfortunately, its open world activities became very tiring very fast. Getting the Platinum Trophy allowed for me to take a step back and see that the initially really innovative world exploration involving wind and animals in the environment guiding you to points of interest in place of traditional waypoints in games just disguises the fact that playing as a completionist like I did grants the same experience seen in Ubisoft games for over a decade. Mindless tasks, lacking in diversity. I swear man, the amount of bloody fox dens I had to do in the open world. But naturally, this is a complaint that can only be applied to my kind of playstyle. While I still found it fun for what it was, as someone who enjoys going the stealthy route in third-person action games, if it is afforded to me, the mechanics for stealth in Ghost of Tsushima are pretty basic. And of course, as I mentioned, I liked the story and what it had to offer a fair bit. The ending was particularly great. But even though Jin's character arc plays out as I had predicted and is well executed, after we spent over 40 hours together, I can't say I found him to be a super memorable or likeable protagonist. I feel there's a potential for that to change in the inevitable sequel, however, and I do hope he grows on me as Sucker Punch builds off of everything they've achieved with this game. Apologies for focusing on some negatives, mainly because I need to justify exactly why it isn't Game of the Year material for me. But Ghost of Tsushima is a game I would still certainly recommend to PS4 owners. Maybe just not before some other titles I believe are absolutely must play on the console. I loved The Last of Us Part 2. As I'm sure you know, a lot of people did, and a lot of people didn't. But taking away all of those feelings I had for it at the time I played it, and thinking on how much the experience has stuck with me since, it is undeniably my Game of the Year for 2020. In my eyes, every narrative choice which may be considered controversial is a total positive. I could crap on about how I feel the story is masterfully crafted for a long while, and I already did in a 40-minute video I made earlier this year. But never have I played an emotional rollercoaster like this, where every moment, every cutscene, every gameplay stage is executed with such expert precision to drive home its desired effect to the player. And for me, everything that Naughty Dog attempted in this regard landed. The way new and veteran characters alike are used within the narrative structure was constantly engaging and meant that I was fully invested in the journey I was on at all times. I love seeing people who finish the game talk about what they believe the game is primarily about thematically. And the variety of completely different responses there always is means I'm deliberating entirely new points of view constantly and applying them to my own experience. And of course, its writing, direction, performances and score easily stand beside the very best you'd see in film and, ironically, HBO quality television. In my opinion, all of these factors indicate when a piece of art will be remembered in years to come for getting the most out of its respective medium, which I absolutely believe to be the case with The Last of Us Part 2. Naughty Dog are masters at upping themselves, and as I will continue to say to the end of time, that studio's projects always prove how immersive video games can really be as interactive experiences. And speaking of it as a game, they took what was already a great foundation with the original Last of Us and improved on all elements of its gameplay. Player movement is far more fluid, creating entirely new opportunities in combat encounters. Plus, crafting and upgrade systems were expanded upon proportionally to perfectly fit the game's larger size without it ever becoming more in-depth than necessary. I don't think the game's perfect, but my complaints really only relate to design choices which don't contribute to Naughty Dog's larger vision in any significant way. Simply put, The Last of Us Part 2 is a video game that I'll remember as superb for a long while, and that's all I can ask for out of my Game of the Year. Thanks very much for watching today, I hope you all enjoyed, as always. Please let me know what your favourite game of 2020 has been in the comments. I'll see you when I see you, hopefully on the Cinema Effect podcast where we talk about movies every single week. There's a link in the description, not very subtle plug. But alas, please have a great holiday, take care and farewell.